Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard, and more specifically, the Let's Talk Cardboard episode number 5. We have the full crew here again. Lucky you. We've got...
wearing the same things, weirdly.
Weirdly, a different day though. We don't wash our clothes. Ryan, Nick, myself, Corey, John, and Jerch. Hello everyone. And as promised a couple episodes ago, I did want to go through one of our viewers' questions that we received in the comments section. And so again, a reminder to you all, if you want to leave any questions in the comments, do so, please. We will answer those questions in following episodes. But circling back to Power to the Meeple 1410, they asked, do you think the golden age of creating new board game mechanisms is a bygone era? Is it done? Are we not seeing that any longer? And I did respond to that a few episodes ago, kind of on my own with my thoughts, but I wanted to get the whole crew together to hear their thoughts on this because I think it's an interesting topic and one that we don't hear talked about too much. So, Nick, is board games, mechanisms, the innovation of new ones, is that long gone?
So, when we think about board gaming, they've technically board games have been around for centuries, technically speaking. And obviously, hobby board gaming as we know it today, it's a subjective discussion, but we'll say has only kind of reached its, really peaked over the last couple of decades. And that's when we've seen all these new deck, mechanisms coming out, such as deck building and roll and write and action selection. And I don't know if I would say, the deluge of new types of mechanisms has been constant over the last couple of decades since I've been in the hobby. So it's possible to say that it's starting to taper off in terms of innovative ways of using mechanisms. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of games that are trying to combine these mechanisms.
Yep.
And I think of deck building a lot, with Dominion being one of the first deck building games. Now deck building is kind of incorporated into a lot of games.
And that mechanism of deck building was the game in itself.
Yes,
the entirety
exactly.
of the game. Yeah.
And the one that immediately comes to mind too is with Undaunted. Now you're incorporating deck building with a tactical game. Nothing new from a mechanism perspective. It's just a way of you combining mechanisms. And I think that's maybe what we're going to see more in the future. And then it's up to, I guess that's the discussion, is that considered a new way of using a new mechanism altogether? But in my mind, it's not so much new mechanisms as creative ways of combining mechanisms.
And I think that was a common response in the comments section below on that video, as well as combining new mechanisms into games is what we're kind of seeing more so now. Is there any other take from any of you guys on whether or not you think there is space or is room for more innovative mechanisms in the years to come? Or do you think we're just going to see more of combining mechanisms in interesting ways?
I don't think it's over. I mean, that'd be, I feel like, pretty premature just to say, like, we're done, no new mechanisms.
Right, there's always going to be something someone
and, like,
thinks
also,
of.
like, Dominion's a great example of, like, this is it's deck building, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very good game. But, like, a lot of the other games, like worker placement, like, how many games did worker placement take to evolve until it's like, okay, this is, like, how worker placement works best?
Yep.
And you could argue, like, each one of those was an iteration of adding a little something extra to it. So I think this idea of adding two mechanisms together, well, that's just two mechanisms. I think, like, you create the right balance, and, like, that's a new mechanism. Like, Dune Imperium, like, you could say that's worker placement and deck building, but there's, like,
area control,
faction tracks.
Yeah.
There's all kind of, like, that becomes kind of its own mechanism in and of itself at some point, too. So I think we're finding new ways to use things better, and that doesn't mean that it's over.
So here's like a devil's advocate, kind of a response to that. So then the first iteration of viticulture, for example, when it first came out back in 2013 or whatnot, and then the Essential Edition that came out a few years after that introduced the new mechanism of grande worker. Mm-hmm. So in the original game, you had workers and worker placement. Once a spot was blocked, it was blocked. Hey, now I've got this new innovative idea where you have a grande worker that can go to a spot that's already been taken to take that action to kind of free up one action that you absolutely need on your turn. Is that an innovative way of doing the worker placement mechanism, or do you think that's its own beast now?
Yes.
I mean, you can argue
Elaborate.
both ways, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know if that's like enough of a change to say this is a whole new thing.
Right. It's more of an innovation on top of
I think
worker
it's just
placement.
allowing more flexibility within the realm.
I mean, along that line, it's like with the Mystic Veil / Dead Reckoning.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
that was more of a physical component type of innovation because now you have these cards that
Yeah,
you're
you're like
sleeving.
card crafting.
Card crafting
versus
is the
deck building.
term.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, is that considered a new? I mean, I
Probably,
think arguably
yeah.
it's a new mechanism.
It is.
Well, I think a couple of big points here is what are we looking at in terms of like eras of gameplay? You know, like if
Yeah.
we're talking that an age of gaming is like a 5-year period or like a 20-year period, because I think of games when we were kids that we've got a Lost World Jurassic Park game that was really just a cash grab on. We're trying to make
remember
money
that
off
game,
of
yeah.
this Jurassic
Yeah.
Park movie, and then we're going to try to slap something that you can do on it, but we already got your money. To as opposed to the recent Star Wars segment we did, where all of these are immersive experiences that build on a large intellectual property and not just one specific entity, and that's only spanning like 20 or 25 years of difference. So it depends on what we're looking at on our like the innovation of mechanisms. Is that dead? Well, it ebbs and flows, and one thing that we can't really ignore is that there was a few year period not too long ago when everybody was stuck inside.
Yep.
And with the pandemic, when there was a lot of staying at home or avoiding other people, and all you had was either the immediate people around you or just your own thoughts, where we've seen since the kind of in the post-pandemic period is there's been an explosion of games and ideas, and I think that's coincided with things like game found campaigns or Kickstarters, where people had all this time to think and figure out what they want to do, and then now they have an opportunity and a platform to be sharing that. So in the years that have kind of come since, there's I think a new energy for innovation and people bringing their ideas to the table. And yes, a lot of them are kind of recombining or reskins or stuff like that, but I think we are also kind of in a new crest of opportunity for what could be out there in the game world.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that comment that, I think with crowdfunding too, you're getting a lot of small publishing people now have the ability to get their ideas and games out there, and they don't have to go through the typical channel of finding a big publisher to publish the games. A lot of publishers are doing it on their own because of the ability of leveraging these crowdfunding websites, and that is also then bringing to light new ideas that couldn't really be brought up before.
Well, to add to that, the big corporation per se has a funnel system. If you want to make money, this is the formula, this is the way we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So it would squash those
Yeah.
innovative ideas, and now we're not seeing that as much. And a bygone era, I know we were talking about eras a little bit, or Dirch was bringing that up. I think we can all agree, or the vast majority of modern day board gaming, or board gamers can agree that pretty much 2000 or pre-2000 was its own era in itself. Like the last 5,000 years is all 2000 and before. And then like another era, like 2000 to 2010 almost, you kind of got that shift in like 2008, 2009, 2010, but like 2000 to 2010 is its own era, and now the eras are getting smaller. I feel like then you have an era from 2015 to 2020, and now 2020 to 2024 has been a kind of a different evolution on that as well. So I think it also depends on what we consider to be an era.
Yep.
But also, so my original response to this was no, I don't think it's a bygone era, but then I changed my answer to more of a yes. So I'm kind of being contradictory to what I'm saying here a little bit, but I think we have ironed out, or designers have ironed out, what works so well in worker placement, what works so well in deck building, and they have been innovating and evolving off of that. But I would argue that that's not a new mechanism. If you're evolving off of something that's already been created, that entity has already been created. Thus, it's not a brand new idea per se. You're just evolving off of that. So card crafting, that was out of left field. I think that is its own thing. That's brand new. That's really cool to see. But I would be curious to know what other things are newly, freshly created out of the heads of designers in the next 5 years.
Can I offer some things that we've seen or that we could see?
Yes.
Without giving any insider
Yes, I would love
information
that.
away. It depends on how we're defining eras, but legacy games is a pretty recent development. I know
Yes.
that Risk Legacy was a thing, but There's so many that have now started to pop up, and they continually get better. So even though the idea is probably like 10 years old, the fact that now they're so much tighter and well run and telling a cohesive story, I think is a big deal. And that's, I mean, it, maybe by your definition on eras, Corey, is it might be spanning a few, but I think that that's relatively new.
Yes.
I think a lot of the generative like AI and stuff like that, and card games like Keyforge and Soulforge Fusion, but then also there was a board game, I don't remember the name of that board game, where it was kind of like you're exploring a
Discover.
land. Yeah,
Discover Lands Unknown.
Yeah, Lands Unknown. Yeah, so then that started to tap into that as well, and as technology and being able to print on demand and stuff like that, I think that that's a new frontier that is starting, and when that's done well in certain instances, and that companies can afford that type of technology, that's a new area of discovery, I think, as well.
Pun intended.
But is that idea itself already thought of? Is kind of my point on what is a mechanism and what is not a new mechanism. So the idea of legacy and expanding upon that has already been thought of now. Innovating on that idea, should that be wrapped into this discussion? Do you think there will be many new innovative mechanisms
For sure.
Yeah.
coming out in the next 5
I mean,
years?
like, that's sort of like, not to like you're saying a lot of great things, and some that I agree with you. Like, kind of nitpicking to say, is it a new mechanism or isn't it? But like, in the card game realm, like, is every new one that comes out, it's like, oh well, Magic's already been done, so that's not a new thing. Like, I would disagree. Like, Keyforge was a very different idea when it came out, and things that are kind of doing a similar but in a different way, like Soulforge, that's a different mechanism too to me. So yeah, I think especially even in the card game world, like, there's a new one coming out now like every 6 months.
Right.
That's a pretty new
That
idea.
vastly different.
Yeah.
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 So I think that's where the gray area is. The gray area is what is considered to be a mechanism and what is considered to be an evolution on a mechanism. So that's why I thought it'd be so interesting to talk about it here.
Yeah.
I think we all agree there's new stuff.
There's
New
always new
ideas,
stuff,
new
yeah.
things.
Definitely.
The board game's the industry's not getting stale by any means. We
Sure.
keep seeing new things.
I think that was a very interesting topic to bring up. I think for the simple reason that Power to the Meeple did mention it as well. Like, we have been seeing so many mechanisms being thrown into one game.
Yes.
Deck building, area control, with worker placement, with this, with that. It's just like, well, can we think of something different? Do we have to rehash or just innovate on what's already been created? So I think that was a very interesting topic. Any other comments before we move on?
Oh, absolutely. 'Cause
Okay.
I mean, you're
not stop
talking
here.
about how it seems like a lot of games now are trying to throw everything in it. Because when you were just saying worker placement, area control, something like that,
Yep.
I bet all four of the rest of us were thinking of different games that you were describing, that it could have all been thrown into the same thing. We were probably thinking about Dune Imperium.
Yeah. We're all thinking Dune Imperium.
But that's because it's our favorite game.
but it's a
Does it
great
right.
game.
Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
it works,
Yeah.
and that
Yes.
kind of at some point becomes like,
Like-
like this part is this thing and this.
Yep.
But you can't just have like, if you just do that one thing well in the game, you're gonna get crushed. Like, you have to like figure out how
Yeah.
these all go together, and that kind of becomes a new thing to me
Yeah.
when it works
Yeah.
that well.
Yeah.
Well, like, I would love to design a game, for example, that is deck building with, when you play a card, you're drafting tiles with those cards or using tiles in a certain way, kind of in a spatial element. Is that a new idea, or is that just tile placement with deck building?
I think it depends how good it is.
And even if
Depends
that's
if you do a good job.
It's brand new
So-
if it's a good idea.
No.
Yeah.
And even if that's what it is, that doesn't mean that's all that it is. If it's done well and it's fun and entertaining, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, you can just be putting things together in a different way, as long as it's something fun for people to do, as long as it's engaging and it brings people together. That's the point of games anyway. So it doesn't need to be something revolutionary to be worthy.
And I completely agree. And I think a lot of what I'm saying is kind of the devil's advocate, but like, so is the invention of the wheel, is that thing the wheel, the mechanism we're talking about? Or is using the wheel in creative ways the new mechanism we're talking about? That's the argument behind it.
Yeah.
So I think my take on it is more of like, the wheel is the invention. If you're going to use it in various ways, that is not new. It's a new idea to do with that innovative mechanism. But I think that's the two ways to look at it. Which side are you on? And I think we can all agree that there's no one right side to the
totally.
argument, and that's why it's so interesting. So moving on to the next topic, or this is super interesting, so whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, I think we've established that we think it's not stale or dead, but that that doesn't mean that there's not like ebbs and flows. And it depends on how you view what new mechanisms are, or if kind of refitting the puzzle pieces together constitutes something that is new and exciting enough. So yeah, it's a good point.
And for me, as a person that just likes playing games, I just get excited when I see something new. I don't really obviously pull back the layers and say, well, where did this inspiration come from? Or
He
I
doesn't
just
want to play it. He just wants to get it.
He just wants to buy it,
yeah, and look at
make
it.
an unboxing video on
This
it,
looks cool.
and then sell it.
Yeah.
But like, I think something I'm seeing more of is like the open world type of
Yeah.
board game, like this Earthborn Rangers game. We talked about that, but then there's this new game coming out called Spirit Fire, and there's not really like, these games are coming out that don't have like a set ending, and that's like a new genre almost, and it looks really cool. And I've really appreciated the booklet style games that, like Gloomhaven Jaws of the Line, the map is a book, which maybe started with actually Stuffed Fables from Playdeck Games, but like that's
great.
a new way of like, great, I don't have to worry about all the different puzzle pieces I need to put out on the table, and I don't know, stuff like that just gets me excited. And
That is true.
You know,
I have to have a tackle box for the Imperial Assault stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's cumbersome.
That is a bygone era.
so
in
anyway,
itself. So on to another viewer's question here, because I think we've kind of beat that other one to death. So from viewer Jacob Ramirez -19DT, it's kind of hard to read here, but yeah, from Jacob Ramirez, he asks, what are some of our favorite games that feel like you are experiencing the theme while playing the game?
Ooh.
So let's kind of get into that. I think we each have maybe one or two games in mind that we wanted to talk about. Maybe we'll start with Church this time. Do you have some?
Oh, I've got so many thoughts on this.
Okay.
I think the previous video that we did on the Star Wars games.
I was going to say that. I was going to say my whole. I'm not going to have one,
That's
but
cheating.
just go look at our last video.
Yes.
All top 5 of those, maybe with the exception of Star Wars Unlimited, the card game. Yeah, Rebellion, X-Wing, Imperial Assault, Outer Rim.
Besides those games.
Those feel really Star Warsy.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree. I think that's an excellent place to start. I think one of the games that sticks out to me right away that people just abandon all sense of reality and dive right into the game is the Resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Because the theme is betrayal and like secret hidden identity. It's so simple, but instantly people are skeptical of each other and trying to be either hidden their identities or trying to be overly truthful to try to get people to agree with them. And it just, as soon as people, especially if it's their first time playing, as soon as they understand what's going on, you just see a change in people's demeanor. And then everybody just dives right in. There's not the story behind the game that's going on doesn't really matter a whole lot, because people are making up their own stories in their heads of who do I trust. And I think that just is so fun to dive right in
trust
and
no
see.
one.
Exactly. No, you have to trust someone. You have to trust someone, whichever side
You're
you're
just
on.
rolling the dice. Let's
So
be honest.
stress-inducing.
Yes, exactly, which is like that theme. It's the theme of distrust. And so that's one that sticks out to me, in addition to the Star Wars ones that we all talked about last episode.
Yeah. John, what do you got?
I don't want to be next.
Okay. Ryan,
Star Wars.
what do you got?
The first one that came to mind for me right away when this was brought up was Legacy Encounter Alien.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
If
Speaking of
you
dread.
love the Alien series, I mean, you're like right in it, and you feel the tension, you feel the stress, like you feel like you're stranded on the ship and these things are out to get you, and it follows the movies very, like, impressively faithfully to me. Like, it really does a nice job, and you feel like you're on the Nostradamus.
Don't the scenarios
for sure.
play through like the different movies
Yeah,
also?
you can play through the whole series up to like Alien. I think it's everything up to Alien versus Predator, essentially.
Oh, good. That's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. Nick?
Couple that came to mind for me, which were games that I one was more of a recent game that I played, which was called Mr. President, actually, where you're basically, it's a simulation in a box of trying to essentially be the president of the United States, and I felt like it was almost stressful. It felt like work. And I was
right.
like, wow, I guess this is thematic because you're like the president.
Did you walk out of the room and your hair was
Yeah,
all
exactly.
gray?
My dad was. I had to bring him to the hot. Like my dad was my vice president. He came to kind of help. It's a solitaire game, but it's like you can have people making decisions with you, and then you can point fingers. Well, you're the reason we're with China now. Like, Anyway, so that game actually was very thematic, even if it was very mechanical. It still was very thematic and made me feel like I was the president with all these decisions that I was making. And then the other game that came to mind was called U-Boot, the board game, which does use an app for integration, but I feel like it's one of the best examples of how apps should be used with the board game. Like, it was complementing the board game purposely. It wasn't just there for the sake of having an app with the game, but the game itself also, when using the app, there's times you don't have to have this option on, but there's an option that it can the mic's on, so it records sound. So if you're underwater and there's an enemy fleet, you legitimately have to be quiet, otherwise the sounds will be heard by the enemy fleet that's overhead. And then once you actually are like in a combat situation, it's all hands on deck. It's a real-time game. You're trying to give out orders. One person's the captain, giving out orders to the crew, trying to get everyone on the same page. You're firing torpedoes. You're looking at the periscope. Like, it literally feels like you're in a sub. And what was really cool for me is I played that game, and then I went to the Pearl Harbor Museum, or Pearl Harbor, I guess museum slash historical site, of course, in Hawaii, and they have the USS Narwhal, or Narwhal class sub, I think is what it was called, that you can go in, and I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to operate these. Hey, I just need some guys. We need those ballast tanks empty. Fill up the ballast tanks. We got to go to 100 meters. Let's go. Okay, on the hydrophone. Who's on the hydrophone? We need to know.
I'm sure the staff had never encountered anything like that.
I'm just like, running. Yeah.
And then when I ask you to find the gas can, you don't know where it's at.
Anyway, so.
Awesome. Yeah, very thematic. And we have played that one too, collectively as a group. So mine, as the self-proclaimed Eurogamer in the group, I was very hard-pressed to find many Euro games where the theme really poured through, but a couple came to mind. I'm only going to touch on one of the two, but the first one that came to mind is Food Chain Magnate, where you're running your own food chain enterprise, you're hiring and firing people, and really trying to run your own industry. You're doing marketing campaigns to these neighborhoods to try to get them to buy your pop and your burgers and that sort of thing, pizza. So that's very thematic. But my number one that I would go to every time, and one that I really enjoy playing, is Kanban EV, where it feels like you're an employee in a vehicle factory, kind of building the vehicles and designing test plans and testing the vehicles on the test track. And then at the end of each round, there's a boardroom meeting where you're trying to complete these goals during the meeting session to get victory points. And it all comes back to victory points because it's a Euro, and it's just a simple worker placement mechanism to go to these different departments to gather the parts and do different things and build these vehicles. But I think the theme really pours through well in this game. And even more so thematically, Sandra is your boss who is walking
Fucking Sandra.
Yeah. There was a nice Sandra and a mean Sandra version to the original game. In Kanban EV, the newest iteration, she's only mean. That's like in the base. And she goes around awarding negative victory points if you're not doing well in getting certified in these different parts of the warehouse.
Oh my.
So you really got to keep up on your work and get certified and keep up with the bunch, otherwise you're going to get fired. So that's very thematic as well. John, you got a game yet?
Yeah, I'm sticking with my Star Wars games.
That's it? Just Star Wars?
That's it.
Star
we have
Wars
a whole episode on it.
Star Wars Rebellion's probably, I'd say for me, Star Wars X-Wing miniature game is probably the one I feel is the most thematic. Just the dogfight aspect of it is so well done, and the uniqueness of pilots and how that fits the Star Wars lore, being a big Star Wars nerd. Yeah, I won't talk too much about it. We got a whole video about those games.
Yeah. Super good picks. I think that does it for today's episode, running through a couple of the viewers' questions. And again, like we said, leave comments below with some of your questions that you would like us to respond to in future videos.
We need content.
Really appreciate the free content ideas.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
We really appreciate it. So we don't need it. We're not lazy or anything, but you heard it first from John.
No, we'd rather interact with the community, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting to see what thoughts are on your minds and respond to them.
And as I brought up in the first episode of this series, we feel like we're very interactive with the community here locally, like Con of the North and different conventions that we go to, but we really wanted to bring that sense of community to the YouTube channel itself, and what better way to do that than to respond back and forth to each other's questions and comments.
Other than just leaving a note on the bottom of a YouTube video.
Yes, exactly. But we have gotten response back and forth from other people on previous episode some of our responses in previous episodes. So I really like the back and forth talk, the back and forth banter. It's really cool to see. So until next time, you all have a great day and have fun gaming.